Welcome to the Real Advisor Podcast. TRAP, Trap. Please follow us and join in the conversation on Twitter @Advisor Podcast, where you can suggest ideas and themes you'd like the Trap team to discuss. Also remember to like and subscribe to our YouTube channel and leave a 6 out of 5-star review on iTunes. Doing all this really helps us, which means we can do more to help you. Now let's head over to the studio for the latest pile of Trap.
Yes, indeed, dear Trappists. Welcome back to episode 15 of the Real Advisor Podcast, TRAP, Trap. My name is Nick Lincoln, and joining me as ever are the rest of the Trap pack. That is Carl, the voice Widger, Alan, the storyteller Smith, and Andy Hart. Now, this is a very special edition because it's St. Patrick's Day when this goes out on the 17th of March. And from the bottom of our hearts, certainly Andy, Alan and myself, we'd like to thank the Irish contingent. The Trappists in Ireland have been a great support of the show. We wish you a fantastic St. Patrick's Day. This is the one day of the year where the Irish drink heavily and follow the horses. The other 364 days of the year, abstinent in every respect. Is that true, Carl?
Absolutely, 100%, although we don't really drink that much anymore. But yeah, delighted to be launching this podcast edition on St. Patrick's Day, especially the really special weekend, because tomorrow we play England in Dublin for the Grand Slam. And let's just say we're quite hopeful after England's recent performances. So
yeah, let's talk about that, shall we? England's game last week against the French.
He just did. So
no, I think we should really spend. This could be a big conversation. Okay. What was the score again?
Okay.
I heard it was a record. Some world records were broken.
Okay. England 10, France 53, and it was Alan, to use your word,
53.
It was an absolute
shambles.
Bloody shambles. But having said that, credit to it's hard to work out how bad England were and how good France were. I think France was just really good, and England were very bad. But the French were absolutely brilliant, and I think they'd have given most teams a run on that.
I agree. Know. Yeah, I totally agree. Like, they're definitely the second best team in the Six Nations this year.
I wish the Ireland-France game could be replayed with both teams at full tilt. It would be great stuff. So yeah, it is what it is. And Ireland overcame Scotland in a match where both teams, I think, were knackered after the first half, and it was just just a drawn out thing. Okay, listen, we've got loads to get through in today's in this episode, guys. So without any further ado, let's go over to Mr. Charisma. Andrew, read out with your normal vehement brio and enthusiasm some more reviews of the Real Advisor podcast.
Over to me. So 3 reviews. The first one is from Bidal02, entitled Brilliant 5 stars. Love the dynamics between the 4 of you. Very informative and entertaining. Next up is a review from 77BN77 from Germany. 5 stars. Thanks a lot. Being here in Germany as a kind of a pioneer, it's really nice to listen to you talk about the issues that are in my head. I am a CEG, DFA, IFA with only a limited amount of like-minded people here. Thank you to Alan for recommending Trap. Regards, Nicholas. Final review is from Andrew Stitchcombe, who's based around the Bristol area, like a fireside chat, sharing wisdom 5 stars. Wonderful. As I was listening to your conversation, sharing nuggets of wisdom and experiences, I could picture myself in a country hotel in Exmoor, sat in a leather-winged chair, gently cooking next to the roaring log fire, with a pint of Exmoor Stag in my hand, a pen in the other, and my moleskin journal resting on the table in front of me, waiting to gather notes. That's it. Back to you, Nick.
Brilliant.
That conjures up a fantastic scene, doesn't it? I wish I was there too. We should do a live episode.
Those reviews are so good. That just means a lot. Yeah, and that's exactly what I think we wanted to get from this production for the audience, just to feel they're a part of it, and they are sat somewhere and just listening to us knuckleheads in a nice environment. Okay,
and spreading it across to other places. It was the gentleman from Germany who I bumped into at a Dimensional conference recently. Told him about it, and he just, he's quite a pioneer over in that country as well. There's very few people who are kind of real financial advisors on continental Europe, so we are spreading the word.
That is fantastic. Okay, let's give this episode some topical tidbits, so kind of a date stamp for you. I've got an experience I want to relate. You don't need to comment on it, but if you're a business owner, if you're an IFA and you own your business and you're in charge of the banking, you might bank with NatWest. And I bank with NatWest and I have no issues with them whatsoever. And their mobile app is brilliant and their online banking is very solid. I never need to go into the branch for anything. Interest rates have gone up and I've got some money sloshing around in the company bank accounts. And for the first time in 15 years, I thought, I might just see if I can get some return on this money now. So I opened up a 95-day notice account with NatWest online. Brilliant. A few clicks, done. Business account opened up. The next day, it's there on my mobile phone as well. So with a couple of swishes of my digits and I tap this, I transfer a 6-figure sum into this 95-day notice account. Anyway, in July, I need to get some of this money out to pay myself a dividend. So I thought, okay, I'll just set that up on my mobile app. And I can't do it. I thought, okay, that's strange. Maybe you have to do it on the website. So I'll go into the website. You can't do it. Turns out that in 2023, I've got to write to my branch to give 95 days notice to get my money out. It's okay for me to swish the money in through my phone, but to get it out, I've got to use a paper. My branch doesn't even exist anymore. It's now some service centre in Leicester. So bad marks to NatWest, who are generally very cool, but that's archaic. The next thing from me, and then I'll shut up for a little while, you'll all be glad. So I run this IFA forum, this Google group. I moderate and manage it. Nearly 240 advisors and power planners in it now. I'll put a link to it again in the so-called show notes. It's a great resource. If you've got a question, you put it out and somebody in that group will know the answer. Had a chain last week and I've been given permission to use this guy's name, the advisor's name, Ian Cairns of Argyle Financial Services from your neck of the woods, Mr. Smith. He had an email. Well, I'll read it out because I'll read out what happened. Because Neil Liversidge, who's another IFA who runs West Riding Personal Financial Solutions, has put out quite a good little thing about scams on the back of this experience last week. So let me quickly get to this. Out of the blue, a widow contacted Ian Cairns and said she decided to encash all of her investments of roughly £450,000, most of it within an offshore bond. She said she had no plans for the funds. She had ample cash reserves without encashing them, and the investments she proposed encashing were providing her with a £2,000 monthly income. The advisor, Ian Cairns, said that doing this would create a massive tax liability and you just give me time to get the calculations from the offshore bond provider. But the widow said, no, I want this money now. I don't want to wait for an updated cash flow or anything. And Ian put this out to the group, said, is this lady, well, how do I deal with this lady? Obviously, the vulnerable clients thing is a big thing. And we need to be, cognizant of when clients maybe aren't totally in control of their faculties when it comes to money and emotions. And she's a widow and blah, blah, blah. And he put it out to the group and people came back and said, this sounds like fraud. You've just got to go back and really try and just drill down with this client. What's going on? Anyway, it turns out it was fraud. And the advisor, Ian, made pertinent inquiries. So the fraudsters cold called this widow, pretending to be, quote, an investigator from the FCA and her bank, end quote, saying that someone had tried to buy airline tickets with her account and claiming that someone had also tried to set up internet banking on her account. During this phone call, they installed TeamViewer on her laptop. They then opened up a Revolut account in her name. They registered her for internet banking, and they told her that someone was trying to access her investments fraudulently and she needed to encash them ASAP to her bank account, to which they now had access. This is the killer bit. And they told her not to involve her IFA, as this would jeopardize their investigations. Ian Cairns kept on going back to this lady and saying, listen, this is not like you. We've had a great relationship for years. We had a great relationship with your late husband for years. I know something's wrong. Speak to me. And in the end, she said, I've been told to do this. And they stopped it. So just be aware when people act totally out of character, there's probably something going on. And at the end of the day, it's the client's money. You can only push so far. But here, these people, this is a widow. She's not even on the mainland. She lives on one of the islands in a remote house. She's grieving. I imagine, stereotyping, that the husband from that generation was probably the one in charge of the finances. This is like the ultimate vulnerable client. And these people who pray, the plural for these people, it starts with C and ends with S. And if there are children listening, yes, they're a bunch of cads. The good news from this is that not only did Ian Cairns save her, and all credit to this guy, and I hope he gets some press from this, those bastards they'd probably already spent the £500,000 they thought they were going to get, because they were just a few clicks from getting it. So a great story, and the value of having an IFA fighting your fight. So that's my topical.
You worry, Nick, how many other stories are going on? Probably, as we're speaking, without an advisor or with someone who's perhaps less tenacious or diligent. It's awful. It's terrible. So well done him on protecting his client. from what would been just an awful and disastrous set of circumstances.
And doesn't it just show that, knowing your client so well? Obviously, Ian knew his client and had built a relationship over many, many years. You can't do that if you have an online relationship with somebody. It's
any big changes of anything like investment portfolios or anything like that on multiple touch points, texts, emails, phone calls, everything. Before I take any action on that. So
we've all received emails, haven't we? We certainly have emails. Purport to be from clients. Can you please send money to this account? It's always something a bit strange, a bit unusual. There's you never. I think there's a few people got caught out with this going back a few years. What I heard anecdotally, but no. But it's they were wise even to say don't involve your IFA because they knew.
Okay, so in the end, that's a good news story, and I put a link in the so-called show notes to Neil Liversidge's little guide that you might want to use with your clients, just be aware of what a scam looks like. Okay, the next thing on the topical tidbits is Aberdeen have sold their, or however you pronounce it, ex Standard Life, have sold their DFM. I don't know who put that in the notes and who wants to talk about it.
Yeah, that was me. Just a brief thing. It is. There seems to be a lot. There's always things going on. There seems to be a lot of things going on at the moment. Sort of significant strategic moves with some of the bigger players in our sector. Aberdeen, as was ex Standard Life. Just an interesting. It's no secret. I've got a long history with that organisation. Spent many a year working for them back in the day. And I just found it quite interesting with all the other things that have been going on recently, that they sold off a business that they built up over many, many years, the discretionary fund manager business, which was called Aberdeen Standard Capital for a time. It's changed its name several times. Anyway, it's several billion, 6 or 7 billion assets under management, just quietly sold off to I think it's a Liechtenstein asset management company. A bit strange. And at the same time, they've got another subsidiary business, which is a private equity investment business with other countless billions assets under management, which they've also carved up. Well, I believe it's up for sale, and we'll try to sell it this year. Just find it interesting that, and at the same time, something else which was quite widely reported is some of the big investment banks getting very much into this market, this kind of, what they describe as being the wealth management market. Morgan Stanley, their share price has gone up significantly in the last year or two because they apparently have got a very successful wealth management business, whereas Goldman Sachs has seen the share price struggle. And a lot of the thing, according to the Financial Times, one of the reasons for that is they don't have a viable wealth management business. And they made a point. They said, what we really like is a recurring revenue model with high margins, which is good, although unless you're a customer of these organizations. But I just think there's a lot of maneuvering going on at a big sort of institutional type level. And I've just got a slight question mark hanging over. And I've got no information whatsoever to suggest this, but looking at the way things are going at Aberdeen, how viable going forward not an IFA, but advisor arm called 1825 actually.
Well, that's going to be a recurring theme, I think, of this episode. Thank you for that, Alan. Unpack this. Industry Voice, Key Advisor Challenges in 2023. I think a report from Schroders, Andy. Did you put that in the...
No, I didn't put that there, mate.
No, that was me as well. That was one of these. That was a sort of, a recent report. Industry Voice, Key Advisor Challenges. Schroders, they went out and surveyed, I don't know how many, but quite a significant number of advisors, and they came back, and I just sort of shared it around the group. They made some interesting observations, and it made me realize that maybe some of us operate in a bit of a bubble. Some of the conversations we have, because I know I shared it with you, Nick. You had a look at it. You had a particular comment that you extracted from it, and I added something else. What were your thoughts on that report, Nick?
Well, it's just the normal. Yeah, exactly right. It's like the lid is open on the rest of the profession. And there was one particular line that just irked me, where the advisors cited capital protection as the number one concern for their clients. Yeah, so this thing about just locking down to cash or whatever, that's not capital protection in the truest sense. You want to protect purchasing power. That should be the number one concern for the people's clients. So that was just one thing that leapt out at me, but I'm sure there's other dross in there as well. I didn't give a lot of time.
The other point that I extracted, consumer duty on the horizon, price and value, conversation about price and value. And so why, we saw further increase in advisors outsourcing their investment proposition. 20% have increased the level of outsourcing. The reasons for this were, inverted commas, access to investment expertise and, get this, effective management of volatility. Volatility. At what point will people realize that volatility is a feature, not a bug? We're not trying to get rid of volatility.
And hence, for all the reasons you both have just mentioned, that's why structured products continue to be sold, which is like, just the bane of the investment world, unfortunately. But it fits, I guess, capital protection, and it fits consumer duty and looking after the clients and whatever. But that's not.
Yeah,
we put a link to the report in the show notes.
Suboptimal, most definitely. Okay, great stuff. Mr. Hart, this is now talking about things that irk me and this fascination with capital protection and not protection of purchasing power. One of your trigger subjects, lifestyling, my friend.
Yes, so we'll briefly touch upon this. We might want to sort of unpack this in a bit more detail in a future show, but lifestyling is the sort of investment process of moving from what they would describe of high-risk investments, which we call high-returning investments, which is global equities. When they're going to officially retire at a certain point in the pension fund, most of the assets are in what they call lower-risk funds, which might be gilt, might be fixed income, might even be cash. But real-life outcomes for clients of something that's been designed or set up or legislated to protect people has inadvertently harmed a lot of people. And it is pounds and pence harm, nothing else, let's say, but that's obviously a serious harm. We've heard of stories, seen client stories of portfolios or pension values at 500,000 now at 370,000, perfectly aligned, waiting for the client to buy the annuity that they're not going to buy.
Yeah.
And then they're very much underwater because of this unusual situation that happened within the fixed income markets last year and sort of continued into this year. So advisors listening to this know that lifestyling is very destructive to a lot of people's pension funds. I did a podcast on Maven Money called Lifestyling Your Way to Poverty, I think in May 2022. I've guided a lot of clients around this space and opted them out of lifestyling, which has saved them tens of thousands of pounds. I've covered my fee for a decade telling some clients to just turn this off. So yeah, I feel quite strongly about lifestyling.
Andy, that's clients that are in company pension schemes?
Company pension.
This is just built in.
Yeah, company. Yeah, it's built in, and you have to turn it off. And sometimes it's quite tricky. You can't just like go on and just click it. You've got to sort of contact the administrators and stuff. So it's not an easy thing to do. And this is obviously deferred scheme. So you have a client that, let's say, worked at a bank 20 years ago and has got 100 grand sitting there. They don't even think about it. And then they say, I've got this statement, Andy, do I do anything? I go, yeah. Oh, God, we need to look into this. Like, let's, even though it's just been deferred and you've not worried about it, and you've just, stuck the letter in your drawer every year. So yeah, it's mainly DC, defined contribution schemes that people are part of. And it's the default to happen rather than you have to turn it on. So the bulk of people will be in this strategy, let's call it. Probably 99, if I had to hazard a guess at it, probably 90% of people are lifestyled. And these are even people that are financially and investing literate, because it's just another job you have to do. So, yeah, anyone got any thoughts on that? I don't know if it's the same in Ireland, Carl.
Yeah, it is, Andy. And I suppose there's an onus, I would imagine, on the consultants to these big pension schemes, which tend to be the big corporate brokers here. I'm assuming it's the same over there. And I have seen no movement away from it at all. And it's all well and good, clients saying, oh, my annual management charge is really low because I'm in a group pension scheme or whatever. Well, if you're sticking with a very low annual management charge and you're going to end up at retirement age, with a very significant loss because, as you say, Andy, you're in a low risk fund and you're not buying annuities, which nobody is anymore, or very few anyway. What's the regulator doing here? What's the regulator doing in the UK to talk to these consultants about, look, you've got to actually start giving a bit of advice here.
Or just get rid of lifestyling, or make it far easier to opt out.
But it's another one of these things that started with good intention, and it did have good intention, because when these first were launched many years ago, there wasn't any option. Everyone bought an annuity before flexible drawdown everything existed. So in terms of sensible. You preserved your income is what's going to happen. If interest rates or annuity rates moved against you, by allocating to this type of fund, you were likely to sort of counter the movement, be it up or down, because you're expecting to have 20,000, 30,000, whatever, a year in income. So it worked quite well, but the world has changed beyond all recognition in the last 20 years or so. And I'm just wondering if there are going to be, and is there's going to be litigation, there's going to be complaints. I'll tell you what, if I had a fund that I was lifestyled into and I've just lost a third of it just the year before I retire, I'll be wanting to have somebody I'll be having a serious conversation with somebody about it.
That will be the outcome for thousands of pension holders.
This could be a class action. Any lawyers listening to this will say this is easy money. Go and sue the big consultants.
The other dilemma we have now as professional advisors running regulated businesses that we're very concerned about the sort of longevity of our company. Clients are coming to financial advisors and saying, I had 500,000, it's gone down to 370,000. What should I do now? Should I should I change the asset allocation? Do I move into global equities now? Or should I wait until these funds recover? But then again, it's market timing. You don't know if they are going to recover. You don't know, So again, the financial advisors got given a financial hospital pass. Do they do anything? Do they help out their clients? Do they just declare themselves out because it's too dangerous from a regulatory compliance, complaints point of view? So again, it's created other concerns for practicing advisors.
Yep, all good stuff. Okay. Next thing on the topical tip list, I'm not sure who put this in, but this is a Vanguard thing, not the Vanguard thing. We'll come on to that in a second, gentlemen. But Vanguard pulled out of the Climate Alliance. Now, obviously, as the biggest or second biggest, I think they alternate with iShares / BlackRock, but Vanguard are just massive, right? And they pulled out of the Climate Alliance, saying it's basically a political thing and we don't do politics. And that is to their immense credit. Anything to add to that?
Really, I mean, it's a huge issue, the whole kind of climate change thing, and as far as it pertains to investment and advisors and our relationship, it's probably one for we could definitely make that a meat and potatoes in the future version. I don't think there's anyone of us wants to make the planet a worse place, but there's certainly some conflicting issues at play here. I was surprised, but as you say, Nick, it is to their credit for them to stand up and say this is just it is impossible for us to participate in this particular platform, and we're going to stand down from it for an organization with 7 trillion assets under management.
It's enormous.
So
it's enormous. Yeah.
But it certainly creates a lot of challenges for us giving advice, and we have clients that are interested in whatever version of whatever shade of green they want to talk about. It's not easy. We're not going to do it justice right now, but it was interesting that Vanguard chose to no longer participate.
Yeah, I think this is an evolving situation for sure, because the EU regulations are about Article 6, Article 8 and Article 9. I'm not sure if you guys have that, bearing in mind that you're not in the EU anymore.
Nah, not anymore, mate.
We don't have that. We used to have that.
Yeah. No, I don't know. I'm only joking.
But Article 9 basically was the, super duper ESG funds, and Article 8 was the guys who were, we'll keep it in mind kind of thing. 200 billion has moved from Article 9 to Article 8 in the last 4 or 5 months as a result of the criteria being set by the EU Commission. Your point, Alan, about us advising clients. So say if a client comes along and says your remit is to get me into an Article 9 fund. Okay. Say we did that 6 months ago. Oh dear. Now it's been moved to Article 8. So it's definitely an evolving situation, but I think the evolution of it is quite good because the criteria has now been set by independent regulators as opposed to fund managers sticking a green sign on their brochure and saying, we're ESG and we're Article 9. So I think this is a watch this space, and I think maybe as it evolves, it might be good for us to do an episode on this, but I think we should wait and do it well down the line. And I think anybody saying that they're absolutely positive and they know what they're talking about in terms of ESG funds, it's actually impossible. Mary Carney in Metas is kind of our researcher in all of this, and I think her mind is fried from the evolving situation, because literally every few days there is something new on this. Something to keep in mind, but I think there's still a long road to go before this is all kind of sorted out once and for all.
Agreed. Good stuff. Okay. What else have we got? Okay. So, and we are going to come on to the main bit of the topical section, but before that, BlackRock in the USA. We keep mentioning BlackRock and Vanguard a lot today. There's something going on here. But BlackRock have pulled out of the US robo-advice market with the sale of its future advice business. And there's a link to that in the so-called show notes. So again, that's a massive low-cost, low-touch service business closing down with a firm that has got pockets that are almost infinite. And it's just saying, no, we can't make this work. Funny that, isn't it? Because, let's go on to the next thing. And very timely for you, Andy. It's brilliant on your part, and well done to you. You wrote an article in Money Marketing, I believe it was. Financial advice will always be a luxury product, and I put a link to it in the so-called show notes. Got a lot of conversation going on LinkedIn. People disagreeing with you, people agreeing with you, but it's one of those trigger conversations. Maybe just talk the dear Trappists through the through what your article was about, and then we can move on to what subsequently happened. What, in the same week? The news that
the month later. Yeah, so I wrote an article sort of intentionally provocative called Financial Advice Would Always Be a Luxury Product. I put out a lot of content throughout the year, so some things are going to be pretty average and some things are going to get people's attention. I think this got people's attention because I was saying lots of things in the article that would trigger people that are trying to fix this issue of the advice gap and trying to offer advice to more and more people. Most advisors run a business, a small amount of families that they look after, 50, 60, 70, 100. Products can be commoditized, picking products, absolutely. Financial education brands, again, I'm a massive fan of. I've helped train, educate probably more financial advisors than most other IFAs, most other advisors. I've trained a lot of sort of end consumers or given information to end consumers. But I think the business of regulated personal financial advice, financial planning will always be a luxury product. Most advisors get better and better at this business and work with wealthier and wealthier people. That's just the natural sort of progression. And a lot of people come into this space with great intentions of selling financial advice for a very menial amount of money. They want to get traction and attract hundreds and thousands of people, but many fail. I haven't seen anybody do it successfully yet. And then a month later, Vanguard pulled out of the UK financial advice, financial planning market. BlackRock, you mentioned Future Advisor, have also pulled out of it. And there are people that are trying to set up companies to try and address this. Hats off to them, but they haven't yet done it. So obviously my article annoyed some people that are in that sort of space. So yeah, any thoughts from anyone else, really?
Okay, just before we do come, and we will come back to this in a second, we just got a word from our sponsors.
Dear Trappists, a small favour, please. We rely on word of mouth to help grow the reach of Trap.
6 out of 5-star reviews on iTunes and liking and subscribing to our YouTube channel are all great. But
we would really appreciate it if, between now and the next episode, you could recommend Trap to 3 of your peers.
Doing that helps us, which means we can build Trap to help you. Now back to what many laughingly call the show.
Oh, Andy. Okay, so, Andy, thank you for talking us through your article, and then Vanguard pulled out. Let's go with Alan and then Carl. What are your views on this?
Well, it's complicated, isn't it? But I got to tell you that I couldn't not have been more surprised when I heard the news about Vanguard. Now, that's an organization that every one of us on this call and most other people that I know have got immense respect for. I've done the origin story of how that company got going with St. Jack Bogle, and everything was about, good client outcomes. And their office is here in London, opposite where my office is. I've met some very senior people there over the years, and it's all about integrity and good. Everything was just good about them. The very fact that they're not a listed public company, they're owned by the investors, and so they don't have this tyranny of quarterly results and profits like others have. And they've always said, every conversation I've had, and it's public information, we play the long game. Investment time horizons for us are forever. And on one hand, there is no question that there is a need and a demand for a different version of full fat financial planning. You've got to meet somebody face to face and all that sort of stuff. And you just sort of dip in and out, and there are different transitions in your life. You might need to get someone to give you a bit of guidance. And of course, what Vanguard created, and the strange thing is, it's been hugely successful as far as I understand it in the US. But you've got a qualified financial planner, a CFP in their language, who does, as I understand it, proper cash flow modeling. It's all digital. It's all over the phone and through Zoom calls. But that's the world nowadays. That's what there's a lot of advisors. Some on this call. That's how they operate predominantly. So with deep pockets, with an infinite time horizon, and with no doubt about it, an increasing demand for this sort of service, I just scratch my head. I don't know how or why, but of course, it makes you think, well, if they can't do it, if they can't do it, then what chance does anyone have? How could they strategically decide? Because it sends out honestly, don't you think it's just egg on the face of whoever has originally launched that program and then withdrawn from it? Somebody somewhere has had to go to the board and say, no, we can't make this work. It doesn't make any money, or even if it didn't make any money, a company like Vanguard should do it at cost.
Just a quick point to jump in. There must be something else going on under the bonnet that we don't know.
Feels
about.
like
it's only been going for 3 years. 3 years.
I think it's less than
2 years. 2 years.
It was April 2021 is what I thought. I know Citywire in a podcast came out today. But they said 3 years, but I think it's less than 2 years. Carl, what do you think? Again, looking from the outside in on this, what do you think?
Yeah, I remember when it was launched, it was all my UK colleagues were going, "Oh my God, here come Vanguard! Are they
this is the end."
Yeah, some of them were, Carl. Some of them were, some of them weren't. But yeah,
you were right again, Nick. Well done. Look, I think on the one hand, it's there's two positions on this, right? You can be a little bit smug, say, yeah, we do that, and they couldn't do it with all their money. But then I think Alan's point is really well made. And I think it's, if you're trying to scale or get to any kind of scale, it just proves, that it's just bloody difficult to do this. And this is all about human relationships. Whether it's done via Zoom or whether it's done in person, it is all about human relationships. And, it's going to be hard to scale that. And that's why robo-advice is, has run into difficulty, and that's why Vanguard have run into difficulty not being able to do full fat financial planning. So on the one hand, it's kind of nice that the little boys have won here, but on the other hand, it's I've always thought we can scale this thing and let's drive it on, and now you'd have to sit back and go, okay, well, like Alan said, if they can't do it, who bloody well can? So. Yeah, it's interesting that I'm just minded to, with all these topical tidbits that we're talking about today, there's just so much happening. And it is, most of it, is kind of, we're sitting back in Ireland looking at it all happening because it's mostly happening in the UK market. But the only constant seems to be change. And they'll also see that I was deeply uncomfortable with the content of some of today's podcast. Owing to the Irish versus UK cultural differences.
He is wearing his rugby shirt.
There you go. The view from the outside in on the Vanguard thing. Maybe I'll just draw a line. I mean, for me, as Alan said, and I want to say it as well, but I just cannot believe how they've dropped the ball on this. Such a brand. They do this brilliant research into the advisor market with their Advisor Alpha papers in the US and here. They know this market. They know the advice market. They know the direct-to-consumer market.
And a lot of smart people they employed as well, Nick, that we know a lot of them as well.
Yeah.
In Vanguard Towers.
Yeah, James Norton was quite a voice in the IFA world. And I just, but part of me also thinks, you know what? I kind of come out with some admiration for them because other brands would have said, "Oh Christ, we'll just keep on putting money into this, and after maybe 10 years, we'll shutter it, and it'll go away." They said no. After less than 2 years, I think it's less than 2 years. They said no, this isn't working. We're just going to.
So just to be clear on this is different. We got you were. Not quite conflating, but the BlackRock thing in the US and others was a robo. You say robo advice, but there was no advice, wasn't it? So all these it's a version of in the UK we've had.
I think it was a bit of a hybrid future advisor, Alan. Bit of a hybrid.
Well, eventually, I don't know much about it other than what I read. Eventually, they kind of plugged it into RIAs, as they call them over there, advisor firms became the kind of the
back end tech.
Stuff.
Yeah.
But ultimately, the traditional robo-advisors we know it, like the likes of Nutmeg, who themselves have now been flogged off to JP Morgan, I think.
Yeah.
So that was a misnomer, wasn't it? Because as robo-advisor, there was no advice from it. It was effectively a paint by numbers, low-cost index
asset allocation
thing. Choose your funds, do a risk profiler thing online.
Robo-portfolio, yeah.
And I always felt that was going to struggle a bit because it just, for the target audience, the cost of acquisition per client was significant. And they sold on low cost. That was the big thing. So the margins were wafer thin, and the sort of time to break even was decades ahead. It was going to struggle. But the Vanguard thing was different because it was advice. It was planning. It was building a financial plan, and it was all right. It was a sort of they couldn't deal with anything complex. That was the issue. But for this audience, there absolutely is a market for people. I don't know, 20s, 30s, 40s, which is accumulating, building a plan towards probably a retirement in many cases. Need a bit of guidance, need to get on the phone to somebody, need to be shown a cash flow plan. I'd heard, again, anecdotally, no specific evidence of it, but I'd heard through speaking to various people there that they built this absolutely world-class piece of technology that was just fueling the whole thing. So again, what the hell went on? It's almost as if we'll find out later that there was something else that they just discovered. But no doubt about it.
I mean, the market they wanted, what they ended up getting was the accumulation market, and what they were after when they launched was the decumulation market. But people who have already accrued the pots. But that's the time when, in our experience, certainly, that's when people want human advice. Like, I've got this pot of money. Please don't let me piss it away. Just tell me what I need to do for the next 3 decades. And I think you can't do that through a robo advice. And Helena Wardle, who's a young IFA, who's doing trying to do her own thing in this area, and she sent me an article from 2021 showing just how limited the Vanguard service actually was, and there's a link to that in the so-called show notes. So that's they could do very, very little. They couldn't even handle employer pension contributions, so it was like really ISA, GIA, personal pay, and nothing else. And obviously going to go into Vanguard funds. Well, I've got no issue with that at all. If Vanguard with any fund group in the world, I think that probably would be a good thing in the round. But it was neither one thing or the other. And I do think these low cost, low touch services have not cracked it. But there is one service that is high cost. Careful, listeners, careful, Trappists. High cost, high touch. I think it's time, if that's okay with the you gents, that we move on to the meat and potatoes. Let's serve it up. There we go. There's a nice dollop of meat and potatoes. Now, St. James's Place. Going since sound forever. Effects there,
Nick. But anyway, go on.
Yeah, I know. I don't know what the water running is. Anyway, I'll revise that. SJP, St. James's Place. That's where we're going with this one. Launched in 1991. I'll give a brief background to this because St. James, whatever we think of them, good or bad, and we're going to have an honest conversation here, dear Trappists, about our views on SJP. But as a business, as a commercial venture, what a success! So let's just have a quick look at this company, and I'm going to give it some context. I used to work at Allied Dunbar, the IFA division. So Mark Weinberg, born in South Africa and came to this country, I guess, in the 50s. He set up a firm in 1961 called Abbey Life. Abbey Life were the first unit-linked life assurance door-to-door sales force. At that time, it was all with profits. It was all friendly societies, a lot of Scottish life assurance companies. Mark Weinberg came in 1961 with Abbey Life, and today, of course, everything is unit-linked. Everything is unit-linked. But back in 1961, he was an outlier and said, we're going to do this. That was a success. 10 years later, in 1971, Sir Mark Weinberg set up Hambro Life, an even more aggressive sales force, total unit linking, reviewable premiums on all of their life cover offerings, including term assurance and whole of life. Just transformational, superb training, aggressive sales culture, massively successful. The same chap, Sir Mark Weinberg, with the late Mike Wilson in 1991, set up J. Rothschild Assurance, which later became St. James's Place. Again, enormously successful, and a slight pivot with Sir Mark Weinberg. I think at that time, he with Abbey Life and with Allied Dunbar, he'd been after accumulators, regular premium contracts, executive pensions, endowments, great cash flow for these burgeoning companies. In 1991, he kind of went after the wealth management sector, so people that already got money, and he sort of just pivoted a bit towards fund performance, and we're going to have the best fund managers. And of course, we all know what's happened since then. It has just been commercially an unremitting success, and it's an absolute powerhouse. Right, so that's the background to it. It comes from a guy who set up 2 very successful sales forces, and he was the guy behind St. James's Place. Mr. Smith, you lead us off on what you think of the behemoth that is St. James's Place.
Thank you, Nick. If you ever want to promote some activity or attention to yourself, particularly on social media, you talk about one of 2 things. You talk about advisor fees and fee models, or you talk about St. James's Place. Because I trust you. In my personal experience, if you mention any of those, either of those 2 particular subjects, everything blows up and everyone gets excited. Everyone has got an opinion, and usually
you mean people within the profession, Alan?
Yeah, I do. But yeah, definitely within the profession. Also broader, sort of run the peripheral edges of the profession. So I just happened to, it was literally a few weeks ago, about a month ago, St. James's Place publish their results, annual results, 22 results. And I'm just browsing through them. And, remind ourselves about what 2022 looked like. Sadly, we had war returning to Europe for the first time in many, many decades. We had inflation returning to rates not seen in many decades, double-digit inflation. And we had a global stock market, not only a stock market, but a bond market, a bear market, both in stocks and bonds. So by anyone's calculation, it was a challenging year for anyone in business, and particularly challenging for any organization who makes a living out of investment management, wealth management, financial planning, financial advice. Look at St. James's Place numbers for 2022. Without going into loads of detail, obviously publicly available, but the numbers that stick in my mind were that their profits increased by 41% year on year, the previous year. 41% increase in profits, and their assets under management increased by the new flows into the company was 17 billion in 12 months. In a ridiculous year when most people, a lot of retail and private investors were not investing or were pulling money out or being just, traditionally doing the things that private investors often do. 41% increase in profit, 17 billion in money being invested with them. And I took to Twitter and I quoted those numbers and a couple of other numbers as well, which are all just outstanding numbers that any organization would be completely just proud of. And I made the point that regardless of any views that any of us have got, you take your bloody hat off to them. There is an extraordinary commercial success, as you've already alluded to, Nick. What I wanted to discuss and maybe sort of explore in a bit more detail during our conversation now is what can we all learn? Because they don't half get a lot of flack particularly from the IFA community, but from others as well. I mean, the other thing that I posted was I've never seen an organization get so much negative press at the same time. I mean, for going back a couple of years, you remember the Sunday Times just ran a complete campaign. I used to look forward to it every Sunday. Be another article about, they talked about their cruises and the gold cufflinks, and it was just a real hatchet job that was done on them. So the headwinds that they have against them, and yet they were still, they've still obviously continued to enjoy outstanding commercial success. And I was wondering what we can learn from it. And I'm obviously invite you guys to speak in a second. But before I do, I just want to share something that I learned some years ago from dealing with.
Grab yourself a drink, a very long drink. It's story time with Alan Smith.
For those of you who are watching this on YouTube, and if you're not, then go and check it out on YouTube later. Our esteemed friend, Mr. Lincoln, in celebration of the day, has just opened a can of Guinness and has poured himself a nice
poured the
drink.
worst pint of Guinness
not too
in the
bad,
world.
A solid 6.
It's go on, Alan.
Early days in my IFA life, and as we've kind of spoken about in the past episodes, when you are, especially early days, you're looking for prospects everywhere you go, anyone that can Fog a mirror is a
Steam up
potential
a mirror.
prospect. And I remember speaking with sort of friend of mine who was a successful business person at the time. And I was kind of pitching to them to, I can, blah, 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 come review your pensions. And he was explaining to me, he said, no. He said, I'm really, really well looked after. I deal with a partner. He said, a very big firm. I didn't mention the name of the firm. And he said, what he's recommended, I've got some really, really interesting situation because, I run my own business. And what they've given me access to is effectively my own private bank account. And what you do is, he said, you can throw money into it from your profits that you make in the company each year, and you get a tax break on the bank account. You put money in the bank account, you get a tax break on it. And if you want money out again, you can take it out, you can buy a property, you can invest it in lots of other, you can actually invest it in shares of the company, you get other people, you get your wife involved, and it's just an amazing product. And I thought that doesn't exist. There is no such bank account that you get tax relief and you put money in, put money out, and you get a good rate of return, you put it in you know where I'm going with this, guys, don't you? And what it was
pension, yeah.
It was an executive pension plan.
Yeah.
But the words and the language and the framing they used. It was and I'll tell you, even down to the because he showed me his guy's business card, and it's the word partner conjures up a different level of, if you were Joe Blogg's IFA versus Joe Blogg's partner, St. James's Place, honestly, the business card was about half an inch thick. It exuded class, wealth, embossed with that sort of nice logo they've got. They had an office in Park Lane, I think. So everything just came across as being representing high quality and high class. And just the way they described what you and I would talk about as being a pension plan, chop money in a pension and you get a bit of a tax break on it. No, they talked about as your company business bank account, special business bank account. So I thought, I reflect back on that. And that was a long time ago. So the words and language, the framing that this organization uses, we should all be learning from them. And applying it to our own lives. So, Nick, over to you, Nick.
Can I just jump in?
You with your half a can of Guinness down your throat.
Yeah, I've got the original Guinness. I haven't got the draft flow one, so I've got the proper dark Guinness, and it's a meal in itself. Allied Dunbar. This comes back to the Allied Dunbar training. So the broker consultants were taught to sell EPPs, Allied Dunbar EPPs to IFAs using that analogy. And it's perpetuated through the SJP regime. And I've got nothing against that at all, but we're all selling all the time. And if we can make arcane, complex, dull things into something that people latch onto and see the positivity of and the pluses, then I'm all for it. Absolutely brilliant. Mr. Hart.
Yeah, so my thoughts on SJP. I think they're a hugely impressive company, so I echo sort of what Alan says. Disclaimer, I've been working with them for about a decade, certainly with their partners, initially doing sort of Voyant training. Now I'm doing lifestyle financial planning training. So yeah, I do quite a lot with them. I mean, they represent about 20% of our workforce, about 4,500 partners. So they're absolutely enormous. So back to why do so many clients, stick with them? They're reliable, they're sustainable, they're profitable. They're a FTSE 100 company. They look after about 200 billion client assets. The other thing that's very interesting about them, which again, IFA should look into this, I think about 70% of the assets they look after are in pensions, which is exactly the same as my company. The thing that's very impressive, the thing that Alan alluded to, I think out of their 200 billion, between 70 and 75% of those assets are in global equities. So for a company of their size to have such a tilt towards the growth engine that is global equities is fantastic. So during 2022, they wouldn't have been hit as badly to other companies that had a lot more exposure to fixed income. They've got a very strong sales culture, which I think is great, and they're proud of that. The moment an IFA thinks they're not in the sales business and they just service clients, I think they're lost to this business. So I'm all for them being sales. And it boils down to people don't want cheap, they want safe. And I say this to IFAs, people don't want cheap, they want safe. What safe is that's up to the client to decide. People don't want cheap, they want safe. They've got a fantastic academy as well that bring a lot of young IFAs through. And nobody else is doing that. And they do everything from doing the exams, how to build a book of business, how to work your contacts, how to run a business plan. So I'm hugely pro the St James's.
Right.
Before we hear the view from Ireland.
From Ireland.
We've been too fulsome in our praise here. I'm going to take the other side of the argument.
Sure.
Because look, let's just think it through. All the things you say are absolutely spot on. And look, I would rather have a client have an advisor than no advisor and sort of blow themselves up and make all the big mistakes that we know DIY people often do. But how come they can get away with just riding roughshod over what would appear to be rules and regulations that the rest of us have to comply with? This is what I just never really understand. The big one that gets referred to a lot is exit penalties. Now, no expert, other than what's publicly available, if you invest in one of their pension products or their bond products, they have, they've got a position which says there's no upfront fee, commission, or anything else. But what there is there's an exit. If you change your mind, if things change, your circumstances change, we will claw back. And I believe it starts at 6% year one.
Yeah, it scales down
over a period of time. Now, in 2015, our esteemed regulator, the FCA, published document, Fair Treatment of Customers, which was distilled down as TCF, Treating Customers Fairly. First published 12th of May, 2015. Have it in front of me. Obviously, I remember it very well. But going through, there are 6 consumer outcomes. And without reading them all out, but outcome 6, and I quote, consumers do not face unreasonable post-sale barriers imposed by firms to change product, switch provider, submit a claim, or make a complaint.
I think the key word there was unreasonable, Alan. I think the key word there to be interpreted, I'm not saying for or against, that word unreasonable is just...
Well, it's
a lawyer's dream.
Interpretation.
It's a lawyer's dream, yeah.
Right. So I just think in my business, and I'm looking at you guys as well, if I took on a client and he had £1 million in a pension product, and we did all the work for him, we set him all up, and he came back to me 11 months later and said, my circumstances have changed or something else has happened, I need to move that fund elsewhere. I say, absolutely fine. Here's my invoice, £60,000. Please pay the invoice and I'll make sure the paperwork is done. I think I'll be having a battle for that particular. I think that client would interpret that as being unreasonable. I just do. And the other thing I would say is for the largest wealth management company, as you say, Andy, with 200 billion of assets under management, the weight of evidence in favor of index investing and not employing active fund pickers, stock pickers, the weight of evidence is overwhelming now. It's not even up for dispute. Peer-reviewed academic papers year after year after year. As far as I'm aware, there is not one single index passive type fund that you can get access to through that organization.
Maybe some others can answer that. The other thing that people obviously say about them is their high costs. So their annual management charge all in. I think the lowest it can be is about 1.6. I could be wrong on that. And the highest it can be is about 2.3. But again, there might be other fees I'm not too aware of. It just shows you the real cost to run a long-term, scalable business that employs all the right people in all the right places. I believe they're a high-end vanilla firm. They don't get involved in too many weird and wacky type financial products. I mean, yes, they are quite involved. I believe in EIS and VCT and a couple of other sort of inheritance tax type product stuff, but you don't often hear about huge blow-ups within the company. So they're quite tight on their risk. So as I say, it is said that they are quite expensive on an ongoing basis, but is that the cost to run a business that can be scalable for this long? Many have tried to do it cheap and it's not worked out. Nick and then Carl.
Yeah, thank you. So my views on SJP, it is an interesting one. Business-wise, absolutely superb. Brilliant. And it just shows that some people want to pay a bit more and they're quite happy to do it. It's the Stella Artois thing. We seem to be consumed with getting down to the lowest basis point, shaving a basis point. Some people don't want that. Some people don't want low touch, low cost. Some people want high touch and higher cost. And that's exactly what SJP gives them. Some people want a seminar at the local country pile on inheritance tax and come along for some food and wine. They want that. They want the massively thick business card. They want the valuations on beautiful cartridge paper. Some people want that. And this obsession that we sometimes have in our profession with cost, Again, we're forgetting about value. You know, the client perceives value. Sorry, FCA. The client, and some people will say, I don't mind paying that because I like my SJP. I like the fact that he, invariably is a he, will turn up in a navy suit with a pristine white shirt and a beautiful 4-in-hand knot. I want that to be my advisor. I want to go to these lovely offices all around the country. I like the fact that if my SJP advisor makes a mistake, SJP will just underwrite. We'll just say, okay, here's a check to go. Don't go to the press. We goofed up. You don't need to go through the torturous, appeals process with the FSCS and all that kind of stuff. Some people will like that. And by the way, as a business owner, as an IFA, St James's Place, because the FCS levy is based on the percentage of turnover, they are by a country mile the biggest contributor to that levy, and they never ever claim on it. If for whatever reason SJP didn't exist, our FCS levies would go through the bleeding roof. So just bear that in mind.
That's a very interesting point, actually, Nick. Yeah, very interesting point.
Yeah, so it's it's just one of the other things. So, but so that's then coming to the negative. Alan's absolutely spot on. This focus on fund management. I mean, the reason the Sunday Times article got so much traction, apart from the cufflinks and everything else and the cruises, which is pure from the L.I. Dunbar sales school, reward the high producers, was that their funds generally do underperform because they're just dragged down by the charges, and that's just logical maths grinding its way to its conclusion. It's such an interesting brand, but high cost, high touch against Vanguard, who tried it for 2 years, low cost, low touch, couldn't make it work. 32 years into the SJP story. Well, since 1961, what are we, 62 years into this guy, Mark Weinberg, just knocking out these fantastic financial advice sales machines. And again, selling is not a bad thing. Carl, from the outside in, SJP, well, you tell the dear Trappist, Carl, what the SJP position is in Ireland.
Yeah, so they're not in Ireland. They did do a deal to acquire a firm, I think about 3 or maybe 4 years ago. And deal was done and announced, and then it didn't happen. So I don't really know why. I thought at the time maybe that firm just didn't fit with them, but they'd be back. But they haven't been. And there are a few aggregators, as they say, in the Irish market at the moment. But no sign of SJP returning. But maybe they'll be back at some stage. Who knows? I look from the outside looking in. Obviously, I've looked at them. I've even if you just look at their website, I think some of the negatives that Alan has kind of portrayed there. The argument against that would be, well, it's just there on the front page of our website. So it's like, we're not trying to hide anything. It's absolutely 100% upfront. And I suppose at Meadows Ireland, we do have the exact same thing with some of the bigger brands here in Ireland in terms of the private banks, the stockbrokers, that kind of stuff. And they're much, much dearer, and they don't do full fat financial planning. And I remember pitching for a client who was like, yeah, I get it. I know that you'd be doing a lot more and you'd charge us a lot less, but I can't brag about Meadows Ireland on the golf course.
That's a brilliant point. That's just
it's a status purchase. It's a status purchase. A lot of brands are.
And I kind of went, you know what, right? We've hence we've tried to do an awful lot of, we've spoken about marketing before, about an awful lot of brand building and not necessarily client catching, and to try and be known as, the firm that will do the proper financial planning at a reasonable fee. But we'll also look after you. And we do a lot of events now, right, as a result. And I'd have to say, the active fund management bit, that's the bit that just doesn't sit well with me, that there isn't even a passive option. So I think that's a big negative. I think the charges are, if you look at their website, right, just click on their charges. It is there right in front of you. So it is what it is. I think stuff like the Financial Advisor Academy, right? I looked through that. It's absolutely bloody brilliant. And anybody who's talking about the advice gap, right? Well, they're training people to go and, here's your exams, and here's how to build a business, and here's how to network, and here's how to get sales across the line. I think it's absolutely phenomenal. Very difficult for any of us or anybody else to replicate something like that, because that costs an absolute shitload of money. But it's absolutely fantastic. And I would love, dearly love to do that, because then what you're going to do, you're going to grow organically if you put your money into something like that. So I think absolutely, really, really amazing. And the other thing that none of you touched on, right? One of the big problems here in Ireland is how do you sell your business? So when you're getting to I want out.
Oh,
right?
yeah.
Yeah.
The succession planning, that is absolutely magnificent. And, you tie the Financial Advisor Academy in with our succession planning. And I think if you look at their website again, I think they've, 2,500 people have gone through this process. 2,500 people, right? This is just...
Yeah, and they'll facilitate and give a loan to buy out the retiring advisor to give a ready-made client bank to the newly graduated from the academy. It's really, really
at a prescribed multiple, so everybody knows if I build my business to this is what I'm going to get, and it's like they've all clear as day. And then the guys coming in who are going to buy it are getting the loan. They don't have to do any of the go out and get the finance and all of that kind of stuff, which is going to make sure that they've ensured their own longevity. I think it's absolutely amazing.
I think that's the point. It's really smart business, and I think, as I've always said, I'd be a shareholder in the company. I wouldn't want to be, to me, despite all the things you're saying, it doesn't pass the mother-in-law test. Would you recommend that your mother-in-law or your best friend or someone else went and sought them versus anyone else? I wouldn't necessarily. What I would say on this thing is the badge and the brand. Do you know that I read the other day, Volkswagen Touareg car is pretty much exactly the same car as the Porsche Cayenne, but the Porsche is £8,000 more. And that's just the power of a name and a brand. And they have got, despite the Sunday Times' best intentions, they have got a badge and a brand that smacks of quality and good. And the last thing I'll say on it is, I did a strategic coach program for several years, go back a few years, and there's loads of St. James's Place advisors there. And without exception, they're all good people, to a man and a woman. And they're high quality, they're good, they've got integrity. But as I say, that there's definitely flaws in what they do and what they offer. But as they say, I heard this from you, Andy, a poor advisor is
a poor financial advisor.
Andy,
final point on this. I in my consultancy role, I travel around the country and go to lots of different firms. I've learned a shed load from senior partners at SJP throughout the years. Some fantastic stuff that they've shared me of how to grow my business, how to think about things, how to pitch stuff to clients, how to talk about things. But granted, I do see, let's say, the better advisors, because they're the ones that pay for consultants to come in, share ideas. I know there's 4,500, so there's going to be a whole sort of mix across that sort of spectrum. But yeah, that's a final point on this. Any other over to you,
Could
Carl?
I just make one final point? That anything I've seen, or almost anything I've seen that's been kind of detracting from the St. James's Place model has all been about charges.
Fees, all fees.
Right? It's fees, right? So maybe we as a profession are focusing too much on fees. Maybe actually the clients want...
I'm not.
Just double your fees, and then you'll do well.
No, but it's not necessarily that. It's like just
people don't want cheap; they want safe. People don't want cheap; they want safe.
Peace of mind, right?
Yeah, peace of mind. Sleep well at night.
And maybe that's the kind of thing that we should be focusing on when we're talking to our clients.
Yeah, but hold on. You mean I can't switch that pension plan because it's 2 basis points more expensive than the seeding scheme?
But I don't want to. But I don't want to, because my partner, my SJP partner, is just.
This is why these robo
it gives me
folks,
tickets to Wimbledon every year, which is another thing.
Yeah,
but these companies that launch, they always focus on fees. We're cheaper. Don't tell me that. Say like we're more expensive, but we do loads of these things that are fantastic. Why do these startups never come up with that? All they come out of is we're cheaper, and it's like we don't care about that.
In most walks of life, this is the point.
Be better.
Yeah.
Most walks of life, the best you wouldn't say we're the cheapest restaurant in town. You wouldn't want to go to the cheapest restaurant.
Don't talk about that. Just tell me what you do, and then I'll work out on the value scale where you sit.
Really, really good stuff.
I did not expect this, and I'm sure the listeners will not expect, we publicise that the four of us independent advisors are going to have a deep dive in a conversation about St James's Place that would be quite so praiseworthy about the organisation. But we are, other than the obvious chinks in the armour, which we know about.
I just think
for me, there. Sorry, Nick. There are only two chinks in the armor, right? The fees that we've done, and
well, they are significant chinks in the armor,
and the active fund management. However, just let me finish the point, right? I'm sure if St James's Place came into Menace Ireland, they would find a few chinks in our armor too.
That's true.
Like, it's just different business models, and we can all get really snobbish about, oh, that's terrible, right? And we can be all evangelical about we do it the best way, and this is the only way. Not true. There are different business models, and they have proven that one bloody well works.
I'm not too fussed about the passive active. Obviously, I'm an asset allocation passive index person. I'm more bothered about the clients investing the right amount of money. Go and see a passive financial advisor who's going to be light touch on you, not really hammer home you're the problem, you're the one that needs to invest. Put you into bonds versus someone else who's active management that says, look,
but
you
need
cheap
to bonds though.
You need to really put some effort into this to create your financial independence. And every year I'm going to be banging on about you increasing your contributions. There's loads of other stuff that is way more important than worrying about the flavour of the box.
It's the as Alan's did. Would you send your mother? I would rather send my parents to an SJP advisor who did full financial planning using cash flow, which they're doing because Andy trains
with
them.
active management,
with whatever, with everything else and the lovely cartridge paper and the nice suit and everything else, than go to an accredited IFA with every qualification under the sun who can't communicate and doesn't do cash flow. And that's how I see this. So let's draw.
And loves ATRs.
Let's oh Christ, yeah. Let's typo under this. I'm going to ask one question that go along the panel, and this is a yes or no. I don't want any caveating. Yes or no. Do you think in the round SJP is a positive in the UK financial services world? I'll start off. Yes.
Yes.
Yes. You know my answer. Yes.
Okay, that's half the Trappist audience are now just disengaging from this podcast. It was a really good conversation.
I bet they do
take up your complaints
give them a bashing, don't they? They would think that we're going to give them a bashing, but anyway, we're.
Didn't some guy on Twitter say, "Oh, you're just"?
Yeah, I know him well. He's an SJP advisor, so he thought, "Oh, here we go, four non-SJP advisors shouting their mouths off." So anyway, I think he'll be pretty happy, and I'm sure he knows who he is. Right, onwards to some
next week's episode sponsored by St James's.
Oh, sorry, just the other thing. Here's the other thing. Hargreaves Lansdown, again, another fantastic company. SJP and Hargreaves Lansdown, both FTSE 100 companies, both astronomically great forces in this world. Always get slated by people that don't really understand this real challenge. So SJP, a massive fan of, and I'm a massive fan of Hargreaves Lansdown as well. Hargreaves Lansdown have done what tons of startups have done already years ago. Yeah. It's done. We don't need it anymore. They've already got the super cheap ISA. Oh no, but Hargreaves Lansdown charge 0.45. We're going to do it for 0.43.
They're just reducing their fees a lot. They've just announced a huge fee reduction.
They've gone down from 0.45 to 0.25 on their ISAs. Who cares? Whoa. Who cares? Their clients don't care. Their clients will pay 0.65, Alan.
Yeah,
because they work.
Well, that's again, we might come back to them in the future, but I know people, I don't, but I know others who use Hargreaves Lansdown and just swear by.
They're amazing.
You can't believe that all the other platforms, and all of us, certainly in the UK, have had our gripes and our moans privately about our use of the various platforms. The Hargreaves Lansdown platform as a user experience is second to none.
Fantastic.
So, so what if you've got to pay a couple of basis points more? Good point.
About 10 years ago, Hargreaves Lansdown invested 50 million. And at the time, all the shareholders were going, what on earth are you doing? To build their own tech. They probably make 50 million a month now from the Vantage platform that they built. I mean, what a stroke of genius move that was. Anyway.
Yeah. I mean, that does in a previous episode. The execution-only VCT EIS platform, Wealth Club, is built by an ex-Hargreaves Lansdown guy. And investing in those things is like tricky because you've got to disclaimer this, disclaimer that. It is so slick. That is so slick, and that's just the Hargreaves Lansdown.
When you want to send something to Hargreaves Lansdown in the post, you get your envelope out, and you write HL free post, nothing else, it gets straight to their HQ.
That's amazing.
I mean, Jesus, HL free post, nothing else. I mean,
I have that. If you just go the Wedge Munster, gets
you don't want to receive what we're going to be sending you.
Andy Hart Hatch End is going to arrive at my bloody post box, will it?
Metis, Norway, and it ends up in your place in Limerick.
Alan Smith, South Kilburn.
Okay, for crying out loud, can we draw a line under this, please?
Please.
Okay, fine.
What's next, Nicholas?
Well, let's see what's next. Hold on, I might just have to refresh my. I don't think the soundboard's doing its thing. It's so annoying. It goes from working to not working. Okay, well, it's the Trappist questions, but we're not getting any sound from the Trappist questions, so let's go on to that. If you want to ask the team, the Trap Pack, a question, dear Trappist, then click on the link in the so-called show notes or the link in the pinned tweet at Advisor Podcast. We're going to do just 2 questions this episode because we're already an hour and 10 minutes in. The first one is from Ross Taylor, who's on Twitter as @RossTaylorFP, Financial Planning. Hello, love the pod, by the way. Such a great resource. Thank you. I have recently taken on a trainee advisor. He will make an incredible advisor, that I am sure. How would you go about fast tracking his training? Already given him a load of Nick Murray books. Was wondering what resources you would use to train someone else. Thank you. Who wants to have a go at that?
I don't mind taking that.
You go first.
Sorry, Alan, go on.
All right, just briefly. This is based on what we just said. Send him to the St James's Place Academy for a few years, but you might never see him again. That's the only thing. It's a challenge because it's mostly small businesses, isn't it? That are, and I'm not sure what Ross's business is like, but it's time and resource and effort to create these programs, which is difficult. We've got our thing, which is grandly titled the Capital Academy, and it's not easy to do. The biggest thing I would say, and it's perhaps stating the bleeding obvious, is get into as many meetings as possible. That young training advisor should be with Ross and or whoever else you've got there. Every single opportunity, watching, observing. If you've got more than one advisor in the firm, I've got a colleague of mine now. He just really expressed an interest to sit with all our different advisors, and all the different people you've got bring different skills. There's positives and negatives and different conversations. So there's no substitute for real life experience. You can read all the books, and even Nick Murray books, best in the world. There's no substitute for doing the job, getting in the room with real life people, live clients, and other experienced advisors. You agree with that, Carl?
100%. Nothing more to add. That's nailed it. That's what I would say.
I would say join Next Gen Planners. Lots of young, newish people in the business. That's the thing that I tell people to do immediately. I would say listen to my podcast. I'd also say listen to Pete Matthews' podcast, Meaningful Money. My controversial view on employing people. If you want people to hang around in your business, you should employ just above average. When you employ excellent and incredible, they're in flow and they leave. That's my opinion. Over to you, Nick.
You should say as a solo.
Yeah, no, someone who's never employed anyone. Thanks for that feedback, Andy.
No, I think you guys have nailed that pretty well. I mean, again, it's not self-promotion. It's not a financial thing for me, but at the IFA forum, if you'll just maybe join that, if you're just learning, join that. You'll see these questions being posed by 240 advisors, and you might just slowly pick stuff up and eventually have the courage to ask your own question. No question is too silly for the forum. Okay.
Post a link to that, Nick.
There is in the show notes.
Yeah. Great.
The next one is from a chap called Cian Callahan. Apparently, somehow it's spelled with a C-I-A-N. I mean, what's going on here? Cian and Carl will sit this one out because Cian and Carl know each other.
He works for Metis Norway, does he?
He works for Metis Norway. Cian asks, how do you arrange client review meetings? Have seen some advisors block off 1 or 2 months of the year and only meet clients for reviews in these periods. Interested how this works in practice versus spreading client reviews over 12 months. So this is the surge meeting thing, which is a phrase that's sort of caught on from America, where you batch all of your planning meetings into maybe 2 or 3 months, typically around the tax year end. We know a friend of ours at the Ideas Exchange who's massively into this. Sam, he's adopted that. So, guys, what do you think about this? And in respect of Cian's question, would you ever consider doing it? And have you spoken to advisors who have done it? And what have they said?
Well, I do it. It's the second year I've done it. So when I take on new clients, existing families, I say we're going to have an official sit-down annual planning meeting between January and March every year. So if I take them on in, let's say, October, I'll either have that meeting, the preceding or the following Jan to March, or I'll wait to the following year, depending on what's going on. So it might be a short year or a long year, but just to get them in sync. There are some clients that I'm going to be seeing post the January and March that have 0 things related to tax, just to sort of release the pressure for me. But I'm getting 90% of my meetings done between January and March every single year. And for me, it's working really well. So I'm going to stick with it, definitely.
Okay.
All right, I've got a view on this, which is counter to that, which is this can be good for the advisor, but not necessarily good for the client. So if you are now, a lot of this is again the outcome of this is predicated by the number of clients you've got. Now, in previous podcast episodes, we've talked about having 60, 80, 100. I mean, Nick has talked about but because of via Zoom nowadays, up 200 clients.
No, I didn't go that high, mate. I didn't go that high.
Well, 150 or something?
Yeah,
it was a pretty punchy number, but let's just assume that you've got 100 and just break it all down. 100 client reviews between January and March. That's a lot. Now, all I'm saying is I don't want to be in the last batch, the last week before the end of March, because you are absolutely knackered. You're exhausted. You're not on your game. I'd rather, if you're going to do it, I'd rather be this sort of in January, please. I think it comes from, if you adopted the kind of the Steve Jobs approach, was begin with your customer and work your way back, you wouldn't come out with this. You wouldn't say, this is optimizing life for my clients. And I just don't think the ability to, from a capacity viewpoint, I think you're going to struggle with it. I understand why people do it. I'm not a fan. I've talked to my colleagues about doing it, and no one really wants to adopt it. We like the idea of spreading things across. What you will often do is you'll have this meeting because it suits you, but then a client has something that pops up during the summer or something, and they want to jump on another
Alan,
meeting.
That's absolutely fine. We have an official meeting where I sit down and do all the nuts and bolts, update the financial plan. Outside of that, I'm available for unlimited phone calls, unlimited emails, unlimited meetings. That's always baked into the pie. But we'll sit down and have the official annual planning meeting between January and March. Usually there's some tax things that we need to tie up. So that's not in dispute.
I'm aware of a few people who've...
Summer we can get together, summer we can do Zoom, but we can do phone call, we can have face-to-face, anything around that. So that's always built in. Unlimited meetings, unlimited phone calls, unlimited...
I mean, again, each to their own. I'm aware of a few people who enthusiastically went down this route and then now reversing back out of it. They're saying, we tried it, I'm just absolutely knackered. It's too much of it. The chances of me dropping the ball or making a mistake, because I've got like 3 meetings a day, day after day after day, are increased. It's not ideal. So we're going to just spread it out over a longer period of time.
For me, it works the opposite way, because I'm sort of red hot on all the processes and the selling down of this, the transferring of that.
Come on, Nick.
So for me, it works a little bit better.
Andy, the ultra-crepidarian Andy. He knows about everything. Andy can't be told anything. His name is Andrew Hart. Andrew Hart.
Just on behalf of Cian at Meadows Ireland, I'd like to thank you for the clarity on that, boys.
Well, okay, I know, Carl, you wanted to do a sort of...
Cian, try it.
You wanted to do a DuPont sidestep, but Carl, in your experience in Ireland, is this a thing?
So the reason Cian asked the question is, so there's a few advisors in Meadows, and the rule is you just have to make sure that you have the annual client meeting. You do it, whatever works for you. So people are trying different things. The exhaustion that Alan talks about, that's real. That is real when you do the surge meetings. But it also gives a great focus to the start of the year. And sometimes, I don't know what your experience is, guys, but sometimes the start of the year can be a little bit slow for people coming back and whatever. Yeah. So if you've got these things nailed on, these meetings nailed on, it kind of, you're straight into it, and it's like gets you off to a good start. But I take the point from both of you that there's merit in every way.
What do you do for the rest of the year, Andy? From April onwards.
The additional thing, Carl, for us is the tax year is this 5th, 6th of April. So that's why those final 3 months of it sort of works well. Well, obviously, I'm still around, Alan. New client work, existing client work, ad hoc meetings, but
Andy,
all of the official stuff.
With all that free time, you should set up some other brands. I mean, it seems insane.
I could do that, couldn't I?
Yeah. I think that's an idea. That's a goer. That's a goer.
I could do another podcast.
You could 10x your brands.
Oh! He said it.
Mind the contagion.
I do actually have the conferences in September and October, actually.
10x the contagion. That's, oh my God. Where's that Guinness? I think Alan's point with the you're just going to be. It could work both ways. By come March, you could be so good, and you've had all the client questions thrown at you, and the answers, the script, as it were, it's ingrained. But there's the other side, which Carl's episode, we all talked about mental health, about the load that we carry. I think if I did all my meetings, and by March, you're thinking, burnout must also. It's a seesaw. It's always a balancing out with this kind of thing. So it can definitely go. But
as I say, presenting loads of financial plans, dealing with loads of different scenarios. As I say, it's like playing shed loads of tennis. You're going to be decent in March compared to January, aren't you?
Exhausted.
Come back to me.
We're all agreed SJP are brilliant, but we can't agree on surge meetings or not. So
that's fine. That's the whole purpose of this forum, is that we can argue, and then I can mute the ones I don't like. Right. I think it's time, as we're at 80 minutes in. Save me. I feel like Ricky Gervais
let's get through this last bit
and
quickly.
The Oscars. Yeah. Okay. Culture Corner. I'll try and do the transition, but I don't think it's going to work. So dun 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 dun. Culture Corner. We've got first off, Mr. Smith. Experiments in advisor marketing.
This is a bit of a blast from the past. This is something when you listen to podcasts, if I listen to a particularly good one, I star it. I think that's good. I'll come back to that and I might listen to it again. And this is one. It's been out for quite a while. There's a podcast, that's the name of the podcast, Experiments in Advisor Marketing, a guy called Taylor Schultz. I don't know exactly how you pronounce it. But
I think that's it, yeah.
Yeah, Taylor Schultz. And so he interviewed our mutual friend, Carl Richards, Behavior Gap, going back a couple of years. And when I listened to this, it reminded me, because when Carl was in London, Carl actually came into my office and basically did a version of this, what he shares. And I remember it... everything that went on was a story from another time, but it was a really great conversation, a great meeting that we had when Carl came in. And Carl said, he said there's two things about this. One is it's so simple that you're not going to believe it's going to work. And number two, I bet you don't do it. And he was right. He was right on both points. But he
was this Watergate?
Yeah, it is a version of that. That again, story for another time. Because often a recurring theme on this podcast is advisors, kind of particularly early stage advisors, but pretty much everyone on their journey is, how do I grow my business? How do I get more clients? How do I grow a business? In this podcast, which again, there's a link to it in the so-called show notes, Carl just unpacks step by step. This is what he did. Carl, and it's no secret, I think it's publicly shared information that Carl has built from scratch 2 different IFA, RIA brands in the US to kind of, $1 million status, and then did one, sold it, went on to another one. And he said, this is the only thing I did in order to build those businesses. So tune into it, listen into it. If you want to grow your brand, grow your business, get more clients, there is a step-by-step as to how to do it. Over to you.
Great stuff. Thank you. Me next. So, Business Breakdown series, which I think was Alan or Carl put me onto this. It was one of the previous episodes where Michael O'Leary was being interviewed, which is just a brilliant episode. It was Carl. Okay, thanks, Carl. And the latest episode in the Business Breakdown series, it was on Alan. Oh God, spare me. Was on the IPL, the Indian Cricket League, which. Now, you don't have to be a cricket fan. The IPL is just worth billions, and it's just a success story. And it's an interesting episode. And the way it was set up, the way it was run, it's done on a franchise basis. And like the American NFL, they have a draft. It's almost like a draft, really. The point is that every year you don't know who's going to win. It's not like football, soccer, where you know who's going to. Premier League, you know who's going to win. You don't know who's going to win at the start of the tournament. Almost every match apparently comes down to the last 6 balls. Okay, so they're tight, they're close, and we don't understand. I mean, I'm a cricket nut, and I will never get it. India, with its massive population, is pretty much a uni-sport country. It's cricket, and that's pretty much it. And the Indian cricketers are treated like living gods. I mean, if Messi walks into a Chiringuito on some Argentinian beach, he'll get some attention, and the same with Ronaldo on the Algarve. He'll go to a restaurant and he'll get. If someone like Virat Kohli or Sachin Tendulkar, they cannot leave their homes. They have hundreds of people just camped outside where they live. in this episode, the chap says he saw a grown man weeping in the street because Virat Kohli was dismissed. It's just next level, and this IPL has tapped into this passion for cricket. As I say, an interesting business story. You don't have to like cricket; it probably helps. You don't have to like cricket to enjoy that episode. Mr. Hart, you've got a new podcast you want to talk to us about.
Yeah, this is someone who probably a lot of people listening to the show know this individual. They probably read a lot of his articles. Morgan Housel. FOMO's got to him, and he's finally decided to put his own podcast out. I think it's just called the Morgan Housel podcast. I think it's going to be twice a week. There's a link in the so-called show notes. He's very good at storytelling on the written form. So let's see how good he is on the audio form. I think he's going to be talking about the behavioural side of everything to do with money. Seems like something he's picked up from maybe another podcast out there. So it'll be interesting to see.
I listened to the first one. It's good.
It's not Morgan Housel, isn't it? Maven Housel.
Yeah, that's his maiden name.
Okay,
you'll be going for lunch with him again.
Yeah, try that.
Lunch.
He doesn't.
Me having lunch with him, Alan. Yeah, okay. Let's not go
another
there.
Story. Oh, by the way, Nick, just to clarify, that was it was a bit of both in terms of where you got that the Business Breakdowns podcast. That was the origin story was Carl's one about the Norwegian Sovereign Fund podcast guy who interviewed Michael O'Leary, which then led me to find another Michael O'Leary podcast. They don't interview him, but on the Business Breakdown, they do a deep dive breakdown on the Ryanair model, which is fascinating. And then that podcast is really, if you're interested in business models and how people make profits and all that, it's a really good podcast.
Okay, thank you for clarifying.
And he's a financial advisor in the US, isn't he, Alan? He's a financial advisor in the US.
Who is?
The guy that runs a business break. Am I confusing?
No, not this particular one.
He's not the Colossus guy,
not Patrick. It's O'Shaughnessy. To do with it, but he wasn't the host of this particular one.
Absolutely.
Okay,
right. Okay. Let's Christ Almighty.
I think we're all getting tired now. Let's finish this up before we all die.
Dear Trappists, as we're doing this episode, the whole SVB debacle is unfolding in the States. We don't follow the markets, but I can tell you in about 23 minutes the US markets are going to open. So for once, I will be looking at the ticker just to see what happens. Carl, tell us your Culture Corner link.
Yeah, so I was reading loads of stuff about this SVB meltdown, and I was trying to get my head around it because it was like there was different people having different stories about what actually happened. So I came across this article from Bloomberg, and it's the best explainer. It's a long read, but I've included it in the show notes. If you want to know exactly what happened, it is a brilliant explainer article. Take the time to go through it, and you'll know exactly what has happened and the implications of same. But I guess the next few days, weeks, months are probably actually going to tell us what the implications are. But what happened at SVB? Read the article.
Yeah, basically, if you start up a bank, don't have customers who don't need to borrow from you. Is the long and the short of the article.
Yeah, it's like if you do commerce in school, like it's like how do banks make money? Well, they take money in and then they loan it out. Well, SVB didn't loan any money out, so they had to find other ways, and that's how they ran into trouble.
Indeed. Listen, I think that's been a fantastic episode. Thank you, Trap Pack, for your contribution. And that's a wrap for this episode, dear Trappists. Thank you for your precious time and input. As ever, please do rate us on iTunes. Leave a 6 out of 5 star. Like and subscribe to our YouTube. But until the next time, from the Trap Pack, it's adios and take care out there, folks. Goodbye.
Come on, Ireland, tomorrow. Grand Slam champions.
Bye.